Now then, we're going to have a chat about the international and indeed English cricket landscape with freelance journalist extraordinaire, and I'm delighted to say that he includes talkSport amongst his vast portfolio of clients. It's Cameron Ponsonby, who's our man in the Caribbean. He's been our man in India as well. Cameron, thank you very much indeed for your time, and I'm sorry to deny you lunch. Apparently it's sea bass, which is quite exciting.
Wonderful.
There probably won't be any left for us.
Well, I'd rather talk to you anyway. So
Okay.
fine.
All right. Great stuff. Let's have a very, very quick word about this Test match and about this venue, because it's an absolute picture. The crowd has streamed onto the outfield, and it has Christchurch treated you well?
Christchurch has treated me really well. And you're right in that this is an almost it is the idyllic kind of Test match setting. You've got the rolling banks. You've got one stand where the kind of players are housed. And I've learned that this used to be 3 cricket clubs in one. And so over to our right, from where we're looking, you have kind of I think it's the St Albans clubhouse. And one of the things about cricket in New Zealand is it's all kind of council-run pitches, so all the pitches overlap on one another, a bit like in kind of Mumbai and the Maidans. And so beyond this match, beyond this ground, there's a sea of other cricket grounds as well. And it's just wonderful. It's a lovely, lovely place to be and watch the game.
Yeah, it's a complete delight. I mean, you came here and had a look at the place 4 days before the Test match began. It was deeply underwhelming. But the way that it transforms into, it really is just a very large, very well maintained, nicely mown field with one pavilion on it, as you said, the Sir Richard Hadley Pavilion. But we can talk about that later. I wanted to ask you about a developing story and a controversial one, which the ECB have said that that county players will no longer be given NOCs, that's a non-objection certificate, to play in T20 leagues which clash with the England season. That includes, of course, Major League Cricket. The Caribbean Premier League comes at the back end of the English county season, and a couple of others. The exception has been made for the IPL. It is controversial because the Players Associations and the World Players Cricket Association have been making noises about restraint of trade. And is it enforceable? We understand why the ECB have this sentiment and why they might like to keep the it's not sanctity of the county championship, but to try and keep it of as high a possible standard. But there are players under the Players Association saying, hang on a minute, our players have got a right to earn a living.
Yeah, I think people are actually incredibly sympathetic to the kind of limited earning potential that players have. Everyone knows that tomorrow morning someone can kind of trip over the pavement, break an ankle, and that's their career over. So they want to maximise their potential earnings. But I think on this issue, I am with the ECB, and I think I'm kind of a bit almost flippant about it. I go, lads, come on. The first mover here was the players. Traditionally, you are contracted to a county for the year. You play for that county over the summer, and then you go away in the winter to go and play, whether it's in Australia or wherever that might be. The issue that is here with this contract thing isn't really kind of for mainly if you're a young player. It's if you're an old player, and if you're kind of only playing for your county in the white ball game, and you're like, you know what, I want to be able to hop over to America to play in that league as well, and the T20 Blast lasts so long, why can't I do both? But cricket has kind of eaten itself over the last however many years, and the issue that the ECB are trying to address is a very important one. And you use the word sanctity. I actually think that's quite a good word for the issue, because the weird thing we've got at the moment is that with all these leagues potentially overlapping, it is occasionally in players' interests to lose a match so they can go on to their next competition and make more money. Now, there's no suggestion that players are necessarily throwing matches, but...
Not publicly, anyway.
No, publicly, but that's an insane thought process, and the same thing to have in the back of your mind. If you're going out to bat for, I don't know, the Ragpur Riders or whatever, I'm making up names here, but you didn't know that. It could be a team. And they go, you know, if I lose today, I can actually hop on the plane from Bangladesh and get over to the UAE tomorrow and earn some more money. The ECB are trying to protect their competitions and protect the idea that there is some consistency with those teams when you are going to watch your Lancashire, whoever it may be, that you know who's going to be out there on the pitch. It's a bizarre scenario where you see last year Mohammed Amir rocking up for one match for the Oval Invincibles and then being on his way. Nicholas Pooran flying directly from America into the 100 to play for I think it was Northern Superchargers, and having to borrow Phil Salt's bat because he got hit before his kit did. Yes, I'm sympathetic to players, and I'm sympathetic to their desire to earn as much money as they can. That's their right. That's what they want to do. Fine. But I think on this issue, the ECB are in the right here. I think they're making a smart move in trying to make sure that kind of their competitions and their players are kind of looked after.
I agree with that sentiment. I think it's a very, very fine sentiment. I just think it's an ICC issue, not an ECB issue. The game is, as you said, it's consuming itself, and it's losing credibility. And I think that this overlapping tournaments and players hopping from one to the other and playing in 7 or 8 tournaments a year, or 6 or 7 tournaments a year, should have been dealt with by the ICC. I don't know that it's an ECB issue. We'll be joined by Andrew Alderson from the New Zealand Herald in just a moment, because New Zealand cricket have dealt with this in an interesting way with their players. I put it to you that counties may well say, we had a player last year or 2 years ago, or for a couple of years, Sam Billings, who went and played in the Pakistan Super League and came back a much better player, and we benefited from the experience that he picked up playing with international. So if we want one of our players, if we agree to one of our players to go and play in the Bangladesh Premier League or wherever it is, because they will become better players with more experience of different conditions and circumstances, then that is our right, not the ECB's, to tell us not to.
But I think that's fine if that exists as the exception. The idea is there's if you want to play franchise cricket, there's no shortage of options. All the ECB are trying to do is go, right, from April to September, please guys, just stay here and play in our competition, strengthen our leagues, the system that you have come through and are developing in and contributing to.
Unless it's the IPL.
Unless it's the IPL, because unfortunately that is, but I think that works on both counts. It's both the money side of the argument there, and also people do go there and they come back and they go, I got much, much better. We saw Jordan Cox. Jordan Cox spoke to talkSport across the whitewater of the Caribbean, and I love Jordan Cox. He says what he thinks. I'll put it that way. And he talked about the 2022 T20 tour. He went on to Pakistan with England. He was an unused squad member, and he said he learnt more in that kind of 2-3 weeks with the England guys than he had in 5 years of county cricket. So training with the best, having the opportunity to be around the best, gave him so much. And I think the IPL does settle into that, where very, very good players do say it's excellent. I don't know where the ICC could step in this regard. I think something kind of learned increasingly over the last few years is the ICC is in effect it's an events management kind of company that goes, right, good news guys, we've got a World Cup this year, get everyone round to mind, we're going to play it in Bangladesh or whatever. But in terms of how much jurisdiction they have on how England control their domestic players, I don't know what they could do. There are going to be issues to be ironed out, and there are valid issues from the players, especially if you're an unregistered player. So if you are someone like, say you're a complete freelancer, so you don't have a contract with any team, one team, you just hop from place to place. If you are still a UK domestic player, at the moment you would not be able to get that NOC to go and play in a foreign league. I believe that's the case. That's obviously an issue, because if you're not contracted to anyone, you should be free to do as you wish. But if you are contracted to, say, Nottinghamshire, surely it is logical and reasonable to expect a Nottinghamshire player to compete for the entirety of Nottinghamshire's matches.
ECB are going to end up chasing their tails. What about Alex Hales? He plays 7 games. He plays 7 games a year for Nottinghamshire. He's contracted to them. What if he says, all right, I don't want to contract with you anymore, Nottinghamshire. You can just play me per game. I play 7 blast games for you. That's all I do. You can pay me per game. And then he sets that precedent, and then other players go, well, actually, I don't want a county contract either if it means I can't go and play elsewhere.
Is that a problem? I think if Alex Hales does that on his own, is that a problem? He's kind of in the back end of his career.
No, he's not, but he creates a precedent.
But I don't know if... I think the fact we have to pluck out one name is a good sign, as it were, that you have one example of one player who it's going to impact in the extreme. And if that's an issue where, for this policy and new kind of ECB initiative to work, you have to iron out the creases of an Alex Hales, a Samit Patel, a David Willey, who have now gone down this route of wanting to be white ball freelancers, that is better to have to work out how to look after the exceptions rather than the rule, to implement the rule and to make sure that the next generation of players who are in their 20s currently or in their teens or whatever have the basis of being lockdown's a poor expression there, of being kind of locked in to their kind of county over the summer, as it were. I think this rule, a new kind of ECB idea, is going to affect players who are in their kind of mid to late 30s, who have already made their money, who are trying to maximise the last few years of their career. I understand for them it could be annoying and problematic, and they want to make sure they can still earn as much money for the final years of their career. But for the greater good, Manners, I think it's a step in the right direction.
We'll have to take this outside.
I look forward to it. I thought we'd be on the same team here. I'm surprised and shocked.
No, I completely agree with the sentiment. I just think it's been badly handled, and I think it's unmanageable and unenforceable. But we'll come back to that. Andrew Alderson has joined us from the New Zealand Herald, and I'm absolutely delighted to I know that you're a very busy man and you've got other commitments, Andrew. Thank you.
That's fine. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
No, we're talking about this phenomenon that the ECB are attempting to, effectively ban county players from playing in any league which conflicts with the English county season, apart from the IPL. They've made that exception.
As you would.
Yeah, well, exactly right. And there are arguments for and against. Well, the reason I wanted to ask you is about your views on how New Zealand cricket have handled this issue, because it's fascinating that, it's difficult to keep up, but Trent Boult, Devon Conway, the captain Kane Williamson have all turned down national contracts, and New Zealand cricket adopt this very sensible and phlegmatic view that they can't compete with the money that these players can earn, so they kind of don't try. Would that be right?
That's right. I think they effectively have to be pragmatic about the whole situation, Neil, is that New Zealand, the players are going to want to earn a living out of the game professionally, and therefore they have to go overseas to do it. New Zealand doesn't have probably the funding or the model to be able to boost that over time. As we've seen with the Super Smash, and when those players are available, that's all well and good, but I think this is going to be a continuing trend. I'm a bit concerned about the New Zealand model in that they've got the central contracting system for 20 players, but whether that's going to be fit for purpose before long. Once you have those players leaving it and pinging off the back, if you like, with the likes of, Williamson's a huge one to go, albeit ironically it's to prolong his career more than anything, to be able to stay in the game. Trent Boult was a big one, and it's sort of been a bit of a horses for courses approach in that, depending on the longevity involved. So they've adopted this pragmatic approach, and they're going to continue with it for the time being. But I do think they'll have to adjust that model.
I wondered whether you had any questions for Andrew Cameron.
No, I thought you were pointing him to say, like, this is what I agree with him. You're pointing earlier stupid.
I do. I think it is eminently sensible. But I don't quite fully understand why Williamson, for example, he remains 100% committed to New Zealand cricket. And I ask on behalf of cricket lovers and probably many New Zealand followers and supporters, so if you're so committed and you want to carry on playing for New Zealand, why don't you want to be contracted?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a tricky one, isn't it, in terms of what he's been able to do. It frees him up, I think, is the saying.
It frees him up not to play for New Zealand.
Yeah, but I think it frees him up to prioritise when he plays for New Zealand. But yeah, whether that means he's had injury problems as well, etc., and it makes for a awkward situation really, and effectively, it's not necessarily an equal situation either. It's based on those other factors of longevity and service.
I think one of the key differences between kind of New Zealand and England is, as both of you made the point, like New Zealand gone, we can't compete with these guys. We need to allow our players to go off and play in whatever competitions and have that flexibility. I think England do want to compete with these other people. They don't want to just kind of put their defences down and go like, you know what, you guys do whatever you want. There is enough strength within English cricket to be able to kind of enforce a bit of rules. Goes, look guys, I know we've had this incredibly immense changing landscape over the 10 years, and no one's really known how to deal with it. Now we're kind of putting a line in the sand saying, let's just protect our bit of the summer. Because I think New Zealand have done, this point is made kind of almost every ICC competition where everyone goes, blimey, New Zealand are really good, and no one lives there. How do they keep producing all these players? And they have so many initiatives in place that kind of are so kind of alien to what you'd expect in England. For example, I believe all the kind of county coaches, as it were, are actually like Cricket New Zealand employees, and so there's more of a direct structure of, right, we want these guys playing so we can get them into the national team. They shortened the domestic season to get more time for A tours in, for instance, to kind of make sure they're developing their players. If you're on a domestic contract in New Zealand, I think it's 7.5 months is the length of the contract. So you're actually a guy who was the overseas player for my club a couple of years ago. When he wasn't playing for Wellington, he was working in recruitment for kind of 3 or 4 months of the year. This is a completely different kind of landscape, and New Zealand faced with a completely different array of problems to England. And so where New Zealand are kind of going, right, we need to give our players the kind of maximum flexibility to make sure they want to keep coming back and playing for New Zealand. I think England are potentially in a bit more of a position of strength. I don't know if that's fair or patronising to an extent.
Neil, I'll be interested in your take on this as well. Is it the wider issue of the global game, though, and trying to find this global calendar and being able to build all these things into it? Because it just feels like players are being drawn left, right and centre, and then you've got all these leagues around the world that are developing now, with the South African League, Caribbean, even in Dubai, and it's just filling it up more and more, and there's not going to be these... They need to create some windows, don't they? Is that how you see it from further afield?
Absolutely. I think that there should be league windows, and I think that leagues should be going head to head. And, as much as possible, obviously there's a seasonal element. Yeah. But I think that, there should absolutely be international windows. Just look at the difference between football. I mean, the difference between football, FIFA is not the most powerful body in football. The clubs are. But FIFA has control of the calendar. The ICC does not have control of the calendar. That's the key.
So how do you negotiate that? Because it feels like, I know BCCI, controlling this more than ICC at times.
All the time.
Yeah, and therefore you've got a problem really internationally as to how you evolve that.
I'm fascinated. I want to ask you about the New Zealand's sending effectively B teams to play international cricket, bilateral international cricket, and from a personal perspective, I love the fact that New Zealand are able to do that, because from the beginning of my career they struggled to put one team together, let alone 2 or 3.
Brave new world.
But I think that's great for New Zealand cricket. But I do wonder about the supporters and the followers. You've got 12 players playing in the IPL at the same time. Another New Zealand team touring Pakistan. And I wonder whether the supporters get a bit confused.
Well, I think it's a fair point. I think it feels hollow, to be honest. If you're going to give international caps out, etc., you want it to really to resonate, if you like. So it does have an element of, is it truly earned? If that's the case, if you're not one of the top players who are already in the IPL who are playing. So, I think that's. I mean, is it worthy of being classed as an international if that's the case? Will be my question.
I don't know. What do you think, Cameron? We've got 1 minute left.
I was going to ask you a question for the break. When you talk about the need for kind of windows and to kind of structure things, isn't that kind of what the ECB are doing by putting in that rule that English players can only play in England for that period of time? That's a window of English cricket. That sounds like you'd love that, Manners. That's perfect.
I'm just perennially frustrated by the lack of power and control that the ICC have.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Frustrates me a lot, Andrew. So very, very quickly, New Zealand could make anywhere between 0 and 4 changes for the second test if they lose here.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they'll bring Mitchell Santner into the squad. I mean, it'll depend on the base and reserve pitch, whether they think they're going to play that specialist spinner, if you like, albeit, Phillips is starting to fulfil that role for them. There's a few options there. I mean, you've got Will Young, player of the series in India, is still filling the drinks, around the boundary. He's certainly an option. There's a few bits and pieces there. I mean, Moji Williamson's come back into the side as the number 3 and delivered with his couple of half centuries. There's a few options there for sure. It'd be interesting to see, maybe even they could have change in the pace attack or whatever. But I think it's something to think about.
Andrew Alderson from the New Zealand Herald, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks for having me in.
It's really great to see you again. And Cameron Ponsonby, you can go off and write something for somebody now.
Oh no, she didn't say thank you for my time. I can't believe it.
Thank you very much for your time, Cameron Ponsonby.